So welcome to today's discussion where we're going to be talking about job hunting in a pandemic. We are in very unusual times with both the second lockdown that's just started, as well as Brexit very close on the horizon. So today I'm joined by my colleagues, the career consultants, Lisa Jones and Joe Sturdy. My name is Clive Lowe and I'll be the host of this session. And today we'll be looking at four elements. The first is preparing for a change and structuring your job search, followed by CVs and LinkedIn, then applying for jobs in a remote environment, and finally, a short discussion on the current jobs market. Before we start, just a brief word about the Officers Association. We were established in 1920 to support officers demobilizing from the armed forces at the end of World War I. And we received our Royal Charter in 1921, so we're just 100 years old. Although our charter is to support officers, our sister organisation, the RFEA, provides services to all ranks. What we'll be discussing today is actually equally applicable to everyone. So if you'd like to ask questions and learn more, please visit our booth at the Security Cleared Expo. It's titled Officers Association Booth. Open the chat function and you can ask your questions there. We'll be manning the booth from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and we look forward to answering your questions. So to start today's session, the first part of it is preparing for a change and structuring your job search. Lisa, could I ask you to look at this? How would you go about planning your transition from the services into civilian life, or indeed looking for a change of career once you're in the civilian world? And what are the key steps in structuring your job search?
Thanks very much, Clive. Well, in my opinion, whether you're changing career, whether you're looking for a new direction, or whether you just want a new challenge and just are looking for a new job, I think really the way that you structure your job search is probably very similar. And I would advise a three-stage approach to this. So the first stage, and in my opinion, perhaps the most important stage, is the research stage. So, really doing your research. What is it that you really want from a new job? And that might include asking yourself questions like, whereabouts do you want it to be? Do you have any commuting factors or family factors that you need to take into consideration? What kind of salary do you either want or indeed need? And those kind of practical questions, and do engage your family in that discussion. Obviously, once you've had a good think about that kind of what, where and how much, those questions, perhaps you then might want to move on to the second stage, which is refining the job search. And that might be drilling down a bit onto that what question. What you also might do in this refinement stage is look at your CV, consider your skills. Do you need to do any other form of training or get any qualifications in order to make yourself more competitive in your target market? Look at jobs that are advertised, but not applying for them yet, but just to familiarise yourself with the language and the skills that they're asking for. And then finally, the third and obviously the most crucial stage really is the job campaign itself. And what that really means is kind of really getting moving and talking to people, what's called networking, and we'll obviously talk about this later in more detail. But attending events, whether they're real life events or whether they're virtual events. And the beauty of virtual events really is that they're actually more accessible, so that shouldn't deter you from trying to find out more. And then obviously it's going to be the job application part itself.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to bring Joe in and ask a question which was asked at one of our recent symposiums. So, Joe, how far in advance of wanting to start a new job or being available to start a new job should you start preparing? And how far in advance can you actually apply for a job?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I've recently heard from somebody who's been offered a job with a plan to start next March. So my first answer would be it varies. Personally, I have been offered work myself where they've been perfectly willing to give 3 months to in preparation for me to actually join. And I think that when you're making contacts and tapping into that hidden job market, you can start a lot earlier than you think, because sometimes it takes quite a long time to actually be able to go through all the steps.
Thanks, Jo. And I'd just like to ask Lisa a question. In the current climate, the travel industry has suffered quite severely. And a lot of airlines, some airlines are going to the wall, others have reduced their number of flights and are making quite a lot of their air staff redundant. So would you have any advice for people like RAF pilots who are leaving? And should they keep up their flying skills, or would you recommend in this current climate they'd perhaps look at retraining and diversifying?
I mean, it's interesting you asked that question, Clive, because I have actually spoken to a number of pilots recently, both those leaving the forces and those who've been out of the forces and working for airlines for a number of years recently. And it is true that a lot of those people are looking to reskill and looking at their skills, both the skills they gained in the military and those that they've kept up, including relationship management, risk management, and so on, that they've that they're looking now to use those skills in a different way. And I think that definitely thinking about how you can be more agile, more flexible in the current job market is really crucial to success. And if anyone is struggling with that, we're here to advise and guide them, certainly.
Thanks for that, Lisa. I think I'll go on now to the second section, CVs and LinkedIn. Jo, what advice would you give to someone who's at the start of his or her transition about developing a CV? Would you, for example, recommend going to get a professional CV writer to do your CV? And is a CV a one-size-fits-all document, or should you develop unique CVs for each and every job you apply for?
Really interesting question, because we've heard of several people who've spent a lot of money having professional CV advice recently. And actually, you've got 3 people here at the OA who have years of experience of writing CVs and reviewing CVs, and our services are entirely free. So why would you spend money, frankly, when you can come to us? So I'd encourage you to at least make us your first port of call. Certainly, it's important to think about your CV as a marketing document rather than a historical document. Having said that, of course, if you're starting from scratch and you haven't written a CV in years, then absolutely do write down the historical facts with your most recent role first at the top of the page, and then go through that and recall all the times where you've been tremendously successful, where you've had some real achievements, and think about the skills that you would like to use in your next role that you would like to promote and particularly emphasize in that CV. Certainly, it's really important to have a profile statement at the top of your CV that's a hook to actually get people to really want to read further. So there's quite a lot of work involved in a CV, and we often work with people several times over in order to get it just right. And absolutely vital is to tailor every CV to the job that you're applying for. Make sure that you can match the skills they're looking for with the way that you describe your past experience, so that you are showing that you are the perfect match for the role. So yes, definitely not a case of one size fits all by any means.
Thank you, Jo. Lisa, one of the things that we've come across in a recent research program is that employers say that they're really looking for people with commercial experience. And in the armed forces, many people have responsibility for things like equipment or for procurement, managing a budget, maybe even managing an imprest account. How could you best convey that in a CV to match the commercial requirements that employers are looking for? And are there any training courses or webinars that are out there which might cover off some of the basics in this?
I mean, this is a tricky one, Clive, and it is something that a lot of people do struggle with. I mean, in my view, the short answer is you can't just fabricate commercial experience. And so if having commercial experience is an absolute requirement of a role, then you're probably not going to be the right fit for it. However, what I do advise people to do is to focus on what you can do and really kind of try to show how far you've gone in understanding where the commercial experience piece is lacking. What does commercial experience mean? Well, you know, commercial experience is about understanding how an organization works, what its priorities are, what's important to it, and how you contribute to the success in that. And you know, obviously the bottom line is P&L, bringing in revenue and so on for many organizations. And a lot of military people will not be able to demonstrate bringing in revenue, for example. But how do you bring in revenue? We bring in revenue by good relationship management, by understanding your clients' needs, giving them what they want, and all that kind of thing. And I think military people can certainly show some of those skills in abundance. You know, relationship management, military people are excellent at relationship management. And I think a lot of military people can actually show that they have provided a service to a client of some sorts in their military service. I also think if you have worked with external agencies or any kind of in any multinational environments with different types of people, bringing out all of that kind of experience is really important because it shows that you understand the importance of, you know, changing the way that you approach a problem and taking other people's perspectives into account, which I think is very important in good client relationship management. But the bottom line is managing a budget or an imprest account, you know, is not the same as running a P&L account. But if you can show you've got a good head for figures, if, you know, accounting has been a part of your role, which for some service people it is, then look at enhancing those qualifications. But above all, I think networking and trying to really understand the challenges that organizations are facing and how your skills can perhaps help them overcome those challenges will be the most important thing to focus on.
Thanks, Lisa. One for you, Joe. If someone has a gap in their CV, for example, they have decided to take a year out to travel around the world or go sailing or something like that, how's that viewed by an employer? And is it likely to affect their chances of getting a job offer? And if that is the case, what do you think about trying to disguise it in your CV or your LinkedIn profile?
I would seriously recommend never trying to disguise anything because you will be caught out. It's quite amazing how many people do actually embellish their stories on CV. So don't do that. I think that it actually is absolutely fine to have taken a year out, because if you can actually just put a couple of lines in your CV to say that you were traveling or whatever it was you were doing, or studying, you may well have been going back to university or whatever. Just put a couple of lines in there to explain it so that people really get clear that you're doing something meaningful and worthwhile in your life. And they may well then want to ask you about that. And it's a point of discussion actually in the interview. But never, ever try and cover up anything, because you will be caught out, is my recommendation.
Thanks, Joe, for the excellent advice. Now, we covered a bit on CVs. Can I just ask Lisa to talk a little bit about getting a LinkedIn profile? How important is LinkedIn?
Clive, I think LinkedIn is a really, really important tool. And I think if people are not on LinkedIn, then they should seriously consider getting onto it and creating a profile and just getting a kind of a feel for what it's all about. I mean, at its most basic level, LinkedIn is a massive database of people. I think there's something ridiculous like 600 million users or something of LinkedIn. And of course, I'm not in any way suggesting that you need to be reaching out to 600 million people or even connecting to that many people. But connections do breed connections. And we've already stressed the importance of networking in your job search, and indeed prior to that in your kind of research and refinement phase. So really, I think LinkedIn is just a very useful tool for you to make use of while you're researching, but then finally, obviously, for job seeking. I mean, I think every time you connect to a new person on LinkedIn, through them, you will have access to all of their connections. So what it is it's about thinking about your connections slightly differently. Don't think about them for who they are, but for who else they might know and how those people could help you. I do talk a lot to service people who say, oh, but everyone on my LinkedIn is in the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. They're not going to be much help to me. But it's not about them. It's about who they know. Who were they at school with? Who were they at university with? Who's their best friend from home? Who's their brother-in-law? Who's their cousin? Who's their neighbor? All of those people you could tap into through each of your connections. And I think that is important. On LinkedIn as well, you can follow companies and get lots of useful information about what they're up to, the challenges they're facing, anything that they're proud of at the moment, and showing that current and relevant information, whether you're networking or even at an interview, will be really great and people will be impressed. So there's a huge amount of information on LinkedIn. There are jobs on LinkedIn, and also crucially, there are people on LinkedIn. And I think when you're job seeking, people are your best resource. And the OA, for anyone who is affiliated with the OA, can join up and get a free LinkedIn workshop, which we run fairly often. One thing I would just add is that when you're writing your CV, your LinkedIn and your CV should be delivering broadly the same message. So when you're tinkering about with your CV, do look at LinkedIn and make sure that the two are delivering the same message. And as Joe said, it's very important to be truthful and above all authentic.
Thanks, Lisa. That's very helpful. I'm going to move on to the third section, applying for jobs. We have looked at researching the jobs market, we've looked at CVs, but an initial question, Joe, when someone is applying for a job and sending their CV, should they include a cover letter?
I generally encourage people to include a cover letter. I do know that some organisations prefer you to just provide a CV with all the information on there. But interestingly, a couple of times when I have provided a cover letter, there's been a comment at interview that it was really refreshing for somebody to actually make the extra effort to do so, because in that cover letter I was able to sort of perhaps be a bit more personable, to highlight the key areas that I felt were of particular interest to me and where I thought I was a good fit for it. It's only a one-pager, but it can just make a difference and you know, add that little extra effort to your application. Certainly, it really only needs to be 3 paragraphs long. Make sure that you're very clear about the role that you're applying for, why you're interested in it, why you think you'd be a good fit, and finish with some kind of hook to encourage them to respond to you.
Lovely, thanks, Joe. Lisa, in some job advertisements, the employer is looking for specific project management skills like Six Sigma, Agile, and so on. For a potential employee, is it worth applying for that job if you don't have those particular skills?
So I think if you are interested in project management, there are a whole raft of different qualifications that you can try and obtain. And it is true that some organisations will be more specific about having those qualifications than others. What you might find is that if you are applying for a job online, your CV could get filtered out if you don't have that qualification, because they might do a kind of online filter first, which means that, you know, if you haven't mentioned that particular qualification, your CV won't get noticed. But what I always really recommend to people is really focusing on networking. And so rather than just sending in your CV online and then fingers crossed, hoping for the best that your CV will be selected either by an electronic filter or indeed by some real people having a look at it and inviting you to interview, you stand a much better chance of being invited to interview if you are in some way already known to that organisation through networking. And so what you can then do is contact the person with whom you've been building a relationship and say to them, I've noticed this job on your website, I'm intending to apply, you know, do you have any specific tips for me? Or can you please, you know, keep an eye out for my CV? And what will then happen is that it's not going to guarantee you a job, of course not, but it probably will give you a much better chance of being invited to interview, or certainly of your CV being read in the first place. Now, what that person with whom you've built a relationship within an organisation can do for you is perhaps give you a good idea as to how crucial having that particular qualification is and whether, you know, it's worth your while applying. If on the other hand, you don't have a specific qualification, but you've got a very strong application otherwise, and you tick the box in a lot of other areas, and perhaps almost most importantly, you have got a lot of real, tangible, practical project management experience that you can talk about and give evidence of delivery within, then that is probably going to be a lot more attractive. So would an employer prefer somebody who's got a lot of qualifications but no experience, or somebody who has got some excellent experience but hasn't got round to getting the qualification? Now, I think probably the latter. And obviously a qualification can always be got, and an employer might be very willing to help support you get that qualification if they think that you fit the bill in almost every other area. So it's worth really trying to network and understand that organisation and how important those qualifications are before you worry too much about being rejected outright.
Thanks, Lisa. Jo, one for you. Is it worth applying for jobs, even if you don't want them, just to get interview practice and experience?
There's two schools of thought with this one. Some employers will not appreciate what I call tire kickers, where you're actually wasting their time. But so really important that you think about, is this a job that I'm really capable of doing and I'm interested in doing? You will probably find that there will be a number of interviews where you improve. And so every interview, if it's unsuccessful, is of course a rehearsal for or practice for the next one. So from that point of view, the more interviews you do, the better you get at them. And the more you realize, so long as you actually really review each interview and think about it afterwards and go, what could I have done more of? What could I have done better? What did I miss? So that you learn for the next one. So whilst it's always important to practice, just be careful that you're not applying for jobs that are completely out of left field and not realistic. But certainly do talk to your career consultant and ask them to help you with some practice interviews. If you send us a job description and a copy of the CV that you have used to apply for a role, we're more than happy to spend the time working remotely with you to do an interview practice. And that, I think, is a really good thing to do. But just think about the types of jobs that you are applying for.
Applying for a job is quite a big task, and you know, if you're going to do your research properly, you're going to make a really good targeted application, you're going to network around that job. You know, if you're going to do it properly, then you really would be wasting both your time and other people's time if you didn't really want that job. So I personally would say not to do that. But as Jo said, you know, there are plenty of other ways that you can get good interview practice.
In today's economic climate, with a number of different sectors which are under stress, for a service leaver, what level would you recommend they pitch at?
there are some roles which service leavers are more suited to than others, and also some organisations that have what I perhaps call a well-trodden path of military people who have, you know, left the forces and gone into those roles before them. And so some organisations will have a very good idea of the level at which they're going to bring in somebody with you know, with similar experience. They're going to probably bring you in at a similar level to somebody who's gone before you. However, obviously there might be other organisations that don't know much about military people, and you know that they're not quite sure what level to bring you in at, and you know it's for you to kind of negotiate that with them, but also to feel comfortable about what it is that they're expecting of you from day one, and whether you feel comfortable that you could deliver that. I mean, I think I've spoken to two types of people really who've gone through this. One who has perhaps gone in at a slightly lower level than they might have hoped for, but very quickly made up that lost ground, impressed everybody and been promoted very rapidly. And then other people who have gone in perhaps at a slightly higher level than they felt comfortable with, and you know felt quite challenged at the beginning, but equally you know have managed to kind of find their feet quite quickly, but have perhaps had a bit more of a rocky ride at the beginning. So it depends on your level of comfort with that kind of thing, whether whether you want to feel kind of uncomfortable and challenged from the word go, or whether you prefer to come in and feel that you've got something to add and value to add from day one, and kind of work your way up there. So I think some organisations, as I say, will have a fixed idea of where you come in based on your rank and experience, and others might need help with that. But above all, it's your opinion that's the most important, and how you would feel in an organisation about perhaps taking a step back and learning the ropes. I mean, I've heard people saying things like, you wouldn't expect a civvy to come in and command a regiment, would you? So, I think that there's an element of truth about that. So you do probably need to learn something before you can start delivering at a very high level.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Just one more subject I wanted to address, and that's the current jobs market. In the current climate, which are the sectors that are most buoyant at the moment, and which sectors do you feel might struggle to recover?
The areas that are likely to be more buoyant during the COVID pandemic are likely to be logistics. Look at Amazon, they've never been busier. Certainly some of the utility companies that are always going to be needing people, and quite a few of the consulting firms are actually hiring project managers at the moment. It's not always going to be guaranteed, of course, because they're reliant on clients coming through. So those be some of the ones. And also cyber security, known people recently who found security roles all over the globe, in fact. So those are probably the ones that are most likely to be good. And of course, defence is busy. The defence sector is busy. The MOD are advertising roles with us quite frequently. The areas, of course, that are not going to pick up for quite some time would be aviation, travel and tourism, I would suggest. So not such a good area to be going into. But I'm sure Lisa might have some other ideas.
Completely agree with what Jo's just said, but just to add, what one of my colleagues said recently, it's roles where, you're keeping the country going, keeping the country moving, that are most in demand. So as Jo says, logistics, transport, anything to do with kind of healthcare or utilities or infrastructure, construction, that kind of thing, are all in demand. And kind of online retail is also, supermarkets, but also just getting those deliveries out and so on. And certainly, you know, there are areas that are struggling at the moment. And so perhaps if you've had your heart set on a role in some kind of event management or something, you know, you might have to have a rethink and think, actually, now is not a good time to be getting into event management. But what can I do perhaps around that that might, you know, still make good use of my skills? And I think it really is having a good think about your skills, but also, you know, what you feel you would be good at, and also how you feel you would add value. And I think when military people leave the forces, one of the things that they, I think, almost miss about having been in the forces is that sense of purpose and that sense of doing something important that matters. And if that has been really important to you during your service, then look to do something that will give you a similar sense of purpose and doing something that matters again.
Sound advice. One final question for you both then. With the lockdown, many people have been able to work remotely. So for somebody looking for a new job, does that mean, do you think, that they could expand their geographical area to search for jobs?
I would say so, because I've spoken to people in consulting firms where the head office is in London, and they may be living as far away as, you know, Gloucester, because increasingly I think people are realizing that you can work remotely, and it's probably going to be a model that will continue on into the future. So I would not be too perturbed about the commuting issue. Certainly talking to employers, it seems that that's not such a problem as it might have been considered in the past.
I think it's also about your attitude and how you come across. So obviously, I don't think it's a very good idea to start a conversation by saying, I really don't want to come to London, or I don't live anywhere near your head office. You know, is that going to be a problem? You know, I think even in the current climate, you may be required to go to that head office for meetings and so on. And so I think it's about demonstrating flexibility and understanding that that is where the head office is, and that's probably, you know, not necessarily going to change. But absolutely, there probably will be a lot more flexibility. And certainly at the moment, a huge number of people are still working remotely. And, you know, I think a lot of people are rethinking the way that their offices are structured and so on, because they're just not going to need the space and the headcount, in desk space and headcount in their central offices. But I think it is definitely about showing that willing and that you understand that you may have to do some travel and so on, and just not making a problem out of it, if that makes sense.
Lisa and Joe, thank you so much for the excellent advice that you've given today. If you're not eligible for OA services, we have a booth, and if you go there, you can open the chat function and ask additional questions there. So we'll look forward to hearing from you. So Joe and Lisa, thank you very much for answering these questions. Here's a short message from Laura Blair, the Director of Employment Services at the OA, about the future of the OA.
As you know, we at the Officers Association work with officer job seekers of all ages, providing specialised employment advice, and we want to actively support you in building a rewarding future career. And we are delighted to be part of this security cleared Expo Jobs Fair. The key takeaway from us today is that your skill set matters a great deal and is really important to the future of the UK economy. In terms of the current jobs market, it's fair to say that the world is an uncertain, complex place at the minute, but your skill set has the ability to take advantage of this. Employers that we are speaking to are seeking in their workforce excellent leadership skills, creativity, and the ability to deliver under pressure, which is exactly why you, our officer talent, are so perfectly placed to step in to the current industry environment. The Officers Association is reaching out to more employers and building really strong links across stable and indeed quickly growing industries, which you can benefit from. And we are seeing that there is absolutely a demand for your skill set, and we're targeting sectors of growth for you. For example, IT, tech, cyber, logistics, project management, engineering, telecommunications, and consultancy, to name but a few. If you're not registered with the Officers Association already, please do, and you will gain direct access to all of the jobs currently live on our jobs board. The Officers Association is also in the process of enhancing our services for you in early 2021 and beyond. We are developing a new enhanced recruitment services platform, which has the core aim of building an interactive online community, offering you the ability to actively network and engage with other officers, industry experts, and employers. Our new recruitment services platform will be able to facilitate quality interaction between officer to officer and officer to employer. As it evolves, you will gain access to tools such as 360-degree online profiling to highlight your strengths in key areas such as impact, influence, and leadership. You will also gain direct reach to our highly experienced career consultants who guide you in terms of how best to network, provide you with interview skills, techniques, and also use LinkedIn as a powerful tool to raise your profile. Our new platform will also provide you with access to quality employer pages offering up-to-date industry advice with the opportunity to participate in webinars and insight days from leading employers who are actively looking to hire your officer skill set. At the Officers Association, we are also focused on providing you with more insight days in 2021 and beyond, as we recognise that this is a great way for you to engage with employers directly. The new platform will be launched early next year, and you'll be able to use it whenever you need it and for however long you need it. It's through live support. We are also running another virtual employment forum this year on the 25th of November. Current employer speakers for that include the Metropolitan Police, American Express, and SAB, and our keynote speaker is Sir Alistair Cox from Hayes Recruitment. So we very much look forward to seeing you there, and details on that will follow shortly. So just to close then, continue to use the Officers Association for job seeking advice. Access our jobs board to find a variety of different jobs there from a variety of different employers across industry, and be confident that employers in stable and growing industries want to hire your officer talent. And also watch this space as the Officers Association continues to grow, and it provides a much more enhanced service for you in 2021 and beyond. Thank you very much.